I'm going to introduce you to Joan McDermott. At the age of 17 and a half, Cork-born Joan, who was 3 months pregnant, entered Bessborough Institution, where she experienced horrors during her 8-month stay. Her son was cruelly taken from her, but Joan became a voice for injustice, yet for many years she couldn't talk about her own story. That has changed, and tonight we are honoured to have Joan, a strong Republican woman, share her experience with us. Thank you.
Comrades, I'm going to speak to you this evening about a very sad time in our recent history, and that was when women who became pregnant outside of marriage were incarcerated in mother and baby homes. I was one of those women, and as Niamh said, I was in the Bessborough, which is now very famous, in Cork, from July 1967 until February 1968. In those days, families, particularly my family, were very much governed as to what people thought of you outside. And the fact that I became pregnant from a so-called good family, and the fact that my father at the time was a TD in Doyle, I'd completely committed a habeas corpus of a crime by becoming pregnant, so I had to be got rid of. Within 24 hours of me telling my parents when I was 3 months pregnant, I was landed in Bessborough. I'd never heard of the place, or neither did I know anybody who was there. Bessborough, I don't know if any of you have ever been there, but it's a formidable building in Cork with a large drive, and it's surrounded by salubrious acres of ground. I was dropped off at the door and met by a nun who I thought, well, she looks okay. As soon as my parents left me there and the door was shut, the nun's face became something, and I don't want to say what it was like, but it wasn't good. 3 things I was told as soon as I walked in the door. Sorry. If you run away from this place, the guards will bring you back. 2, no contact with the outside world. And 3, you can't tell anybody who you are, and they gave me a fictitious name. The regime in Bessborough was something like you'd read from, oh, I'm sorry, but I'm getting really distressed about this. It's like something you'd read in a Dickens novel. However, I endured it for 8 months, and I did whatever I was told, kept my mouth shut. We didn't speak to anybody, we weren't allowed. And I had my first job, because I was there in the summer, was with a load of other women on all fours cutting grass with the scissors. Whilst we were cutting the grass every day for 8 months, the same mantra. The nuns would walk up and down and they would tell you you were evil, you'd never make anything of your life, nobody would want you, you were a fallen woman. And I'd love to know what that means as a fallen woman, but they kept saying it. But sadly, many women believed it and they cracked up. They self-harmed, they suffered severe depression. A couple of months before I got there, a woman jumped out the window and committed suicide. But something in me thought, no, you're not going to beat me. And I got really defiant and I put my back to the wall. In actual fact, I think my back was to the wall so often, I almost came out the other side. The summer became winter, and my job then was with many other women in scrubbing floors. And the same mantra again, how awful we were, just went on and on. Up until I gave birth on the 26th of December 1967, I had no medical intervention, never saw a doctor. And on St. Stephen's night, on the night of the 26th of December, I woke up in horrendous pain, and the night nun used to walk the corridor, and I asked her for some pain relief, which she said no. You've committed the devil's work, you've done the devil's work, and you'll suffer. And in Bessborough, and it's only been spoken about since women like me have come out, but there actually is a cell. And when I say a cell, it's a room right beside where you give birth. And it wasn't a labour ward where you gave birth, but this room was sufficient room for a single bed, and crammed in beside it was a commode. And when you were in labour, you were locked into that. And I'm actually working with the woman at the moment who spent 3 days in it. They don't open the door, they just leave you there. The following morning at 8 o'clock, the door opened and I was about to give birth. And I was screaming like a banshee and asked for pain relief. And I was told, well, you've done the devil's work, you suffer it. Walked into a room next door and I had my son. The regime then in there was when one mother gave birth, that you were immediately separated from your baby and they were locked into a nursery. And imagine that the only time we were allowed to feed our babies when the nun said, or when the bell was rung. We now have evidence that many deaths in Bessborough that occurred at that time was as a result of the nuns refusing to buy bottled milk for those women that couldn't breastfeed their children. And they lied about that. I was fortunate that I was able to breastfeed mine, only God knows what would have happened to him. At 7 weeks old, my son was taken from me, as many other babies were. I didn't know where he was gone. But I laugh about it now, but 2 hours later, the nun came back and I said, well, what have you done with my son? And they said, well, he's gone. And I said, well, where's he gone? Well, he's just gone. And I wouldn't consider myself an aggressive woman, but I got her a veil with great satisfaction and I yanked it off. But I was fearful, for the simple reason was, any woman that disobeyed and didn't do what they were told were given an injection. They were put out cold, and I was terrified that I was going to be given an injection. 2 days after my son was taken from me, my parents came, and I thought, oh, thank God I'm going home. But sadly, instead of turning towards East Cork, we were heading towards the airport. And my mother said, you can't come home. You're a disgrace to the family. You will go to England and you do not come back until we say so. She sent me to a sister of hers who happened to be a doctor. And I spent about 3 months there with her and I couldn't stand it. So I asked her one day to know how do I go and apply to go nursing, which I was fortunate enough to get in. And 3 years I spent doing my training. And whilst in Bessborough, it kept resonating in my head. Whilst I was there, they kept saying, you'll never make anything of your life. You won't ever become anything. And I thought when I went nursing, I'll show those buggers what I can do. I qualified as a nurse. I met my husband, as anybody's ever in London, the Gary Owen in Hammersmith. Went on and got married, had 2 more children. But I never spoke about my secret, never told my husband. Didn't tell him until 2 years ago. Well, he's my ex-husband now, by the way. But when my children were age appropriate, I told them they had a brother. But I always had in my mind that one day I would come back to Ireland and I would get back what was rightfully, illegally taken from me. 2000, I returned to Ireland on a mission, but still too embarrassed and ashamed, as I thought, to divulge my secret. I battled on for 13 years with every door being slammed in my face. But I did get a lead from the HSE that any woman in Bessborough during the late 60s, all the records had been destroyed because all the children were trafficked, the babies were trafficked in a cardboard box, sent down to Shannon Airport in a taxi and were put on a plane with an air hostess and sent to America and Canada. And I've met those people, some of those people, and up until they were 17 years of age, their adoptive parents in America and Canada had to send back money to Bessborough. So it was a great business. 2013, I thought, I'm getting nowhere here. We couldn't find him in America. And I went down to one of my Sinn Féin comrades one day and I told her my story. And I said, I need something from you. I've got a lead that my files, if any, are now housed in Sarsfields Court, Tusla, which is the HSE adoption agency. All I want to know, have they got my files? She wrote to the Minister of Minister of Children, Francis Fitzgerald, and fair play, I got a response in 48 hours that my records were in this place in Cork. So in my naivety, I phoned up and thought that I had some clout, and I said, my name is Joan McDermott and I have a letter from Minister Fitzgerald and I want my records. Well, I nearly died when what the woman said to me. She said, Joan, You and hundreds of other women are asking for records. Now, what I would do if I were you, I would just calm down for the next 8 years, then come back to us, and we may at some point, if we get more money from the government, employ more staff, we might find your records. Which I responded, but I could be dead in 8 years' time. I mean, you never know, do you? That was late night 2013, and I thought, this can't go on. So I let Christmas go, and then the new year in January, I rang again, and I was told, same thing, be patient. Then I got the letter, be patient. Well, whatever that letter did to me, I got in my car and I drove up. And I met the social worker, very nice, patronising social worker, and said, you know, Joan, I understand. I said, no, listen, Mrs., you don't understand. You have something here belong to me that I need, and you're denying me access to it. Now, I request you to look for it and let me know. I am not waiting 8 years. So, to appease me, she offered me counsel because she felt I needed it. Well, I probably did by then, because I was nearly deranged in trying to get through the system. So, 3 times a week, I drove up to Sarsfields Court, and I absolutely tormented the social workers until the end. That was March, the middle of April 2014, ran in the door from the gym, and the phone rang, and the social worker said, Joan, we found your son. Which I responded, well, bloody time, I'm asking you long enough. So again, in my naivety, I drove up and said, right, there's my number. Who is he? Where is he? Well, we can't tell you. So what do you mean you can't tell me? You're telling me that you found him. Now, where is he? Well, we can't tell you because we now have to write to him to tell him we found you. Anyway, I thought, fine, write and tell him, and then you tell me when I'm going to meet him. Next letter was I had to follow their policies and procedure, and I said, no, I'm not doing it. Cut a long story short, unknowns to me, I finally got it out of the social worker that my son was knocking on their door for 9 years, looking for the information, which is he has the right to know who his mother was. They gave him information, an A4 sheet of paper with my name, Joan. Byrne was my maiden name, was cut out with the scissors, and that's all they gave him. How in the name of God could he find me with just the name Joan on it? However, 2014, I was very fortunate. Martina gave me an invitation to go with a delegation of other people in the same position as myself to Brussels, and I had the opportunity to speak in Brussels about our situation. But whilst there, I met women who were in the same position as myself, who, like me, had never spoken in public, never spoken to anybody else about their situation. And when we returned back to Ireland, the time spent in Brussels gave us the impetus to form a group and do something about this. So we set to and we wrote out submissions and we sent them in with the help of all the Sinn Féin TDs and supporters, and we asked for mother and baby inquiry to be held. And hallelujah, we managed to get the bill passed, and thanks to Sinn Féin, because they were an integral part of that. And the bill was to be passed in order for an investigation, a commission of inquiry to be set up. But very interestingly, in 2014, a statement by Nigel Rodley, who was chair of the UN Human Rights, to the government with regards to mother and baby homes, and it states, the Irish state stopped its automatic response to every scandal, first to deny, then delay, then lie, cover up, and eventually effaced, throw money at it and hope it will go away. In all of this, it takes sides of the elites who wield more power than is healthy, whose concerns are for protecting their members. The UN felt that the state's attitudes towards the mother and baby homes and the women was hinted to a view of women as vessels rather than people, reflecting on a long outmoded attitude of misogynistic clergy. When we got that report, we decided we'd go to our own Irish human rights lawyers and see could we sue the state. This was in 2015, last year. And we met with the lawyers and we said, right, we will submit a file of intent to the High Court to sue the state. And I couldn't believe it. The DPP threw the case out. They said we didn't have a case to answer as our case wasn't strong enough to sue the state. Now you tell me that any mother who had a baby who was used in medical experiments in the mother and baby homes, that was trafficked to America, or like the women I'm working with at the moment who were sent down to Black Rock Village, and when they returned to the home, their babies were gone and they don't know where they are to this day. And you mean to tell me the state said we didn't have a case to answer? I thought, right, we'll go back to the drawing board again. The Commission of Inquiry commenced this year. I have suspicions about the Commissions of Inquiry because despite the fact that we lobbied James Riley that we want an all-inclusive inquiry, these were for people who were in industrial schools, mother and baby homes, Protestant homes, but the Minister chose to ignore it. We wanted children who were legally adopted to be included. Again, that was ignored. So with the other groups that I'm in touch with, we got in touch with international human rights lawyers in London. And they came over in July of this year to meet with us, actually up the road here in Rossgrey. And some of us to date have appeared in front of the Commission of Inquiry, and that was quite intense. I wasn't aware that when you appeared in front of the Commission, you had to swear on oath, and it was very intrusive and it was very traumatic. But the advantage of the outside of the jurisdiction human rights lawyers are they can be as critical of the wrongdoings of the government than the lawyers in the state. So along with our own verbal testimony, they will now submit our written testimonies and hope in 2 years' time, when we're now told that the Commission will be complete, we hope that we will have a positive outcome. There are many women like me fighting for their rights in terms of information about their children, because the system does not answer their questions. Only last week, a woman that I know very well met Minister Catherine Zapponi, and she asked her to know, could she answer her as to why she was excluded from being heard at the Commission of Inquiry, and the Minister couldn't answer, so she's now taking her case to the human rights. The women that I was in Besborough with, who I now keep in touch, we found each other after all these years, and those women who gave birth to mixed race babies, that this state and church deemed those children unadoptable because of the colour of their skin, and these children ended up in homes up in a place in Ballinasloe. And one of them lives quite near me at the moment. He's now in his late 30s, and he recalls up to the age of 12 that every time the staff came near him, they put gloves on because of the colour of his skin. And up until he left there, when he was fostered, on a weekly basis, he had his genitals measured. I mean, really, the practices that went on. But however, I pay homage to all the women like myself that have found the courage to come out and to stand up to this government and to tell the truth. I know, and I stand in front of my comrades today, I know that the government hate the sight of us older old women. We're a thorn in their side, because I'm telling you, and every day I'm uncovering more statistics and facts, there's the biggest cover-up that this state has ever seen as to what they did to our children and to women like me. However, Joan being Joan and a good activist, I will battle on, and as long as I have the support of all my colleagues only for Sinn Féin, I wouldn't be here today, and for that I'd be truly grateful. I work with all the other people, including myself, and I apply our policy of a fair, just and equal society. And as long as I can continue with my big mouth to say enough is enough, we want justice, I will do it. Garamila Mahakad Asaged.